Kevin Feige and the rest of Marvel is ruining Daredevil, not only as a character, but if you heard any recent news about the Daredevil series coming out, you'd be worried just like I am. To be more specific, they're choosing to recast more of the fan-beloved characters inside the original Daredevil Netflix series and replace them with, to say the least, very uninteresting equivalents. So I'll be splitting this video up into 3 parts where I'll be going over 1, what made the original Daredevil series so good, 2, why She-Hulk ruined his character, and 3, how the MCU can fix it. Now, to say the least, before I actually get into the topic at hand, I just want to say that I'm not an actual screenplay writer or have any involvement with anything Marvel does. So take my opinion with a grain of salt. All I'm doing is just basically showing you guys an alternative to what Marvel can do and just providing a little advice because they seem lost recently. Let's begin. One of the things that made Daredevil stand out from the other superhero shows around the time was its realistic portrayal of the characters and the world that they lived in. The show was dark, gritty, and violent, and it didn't shy away from the consequences of any of the characters' actions. The fight scenes were well choreographed and made you feel like you were right in the middle of the fight with the characters. But what really made Daredevil special was its characters, ironically. Matt Murdock, played by Charlie Cox, was a complex and very layered character struggling with his faith and desire for justice. Then, in contrast, Vincent D'Onofrio's portrayal of Wilson Fisk was also pretty good. He was intimidating, ruthless, and yet somehow made us as an audience feel sympathetic towards him. The show also had a really good supporting cast, most notable Foggy Nelson, which if you read any Daredevil comics you would know is one of Matt Murdock's best friends and works with him in law enforcement, and Karen Page, their secretary, who both had their own storylines and their character dynamics were developed pretty well throughout the show. But let's not forget the most important thing about Daredevil, the show's amazing cinematography and music. You wouldn't even think that Daredevil was a show if I just showed you a random clip. You would think it was a movie. The show's use of lightning and shadows created a moody and atmospheric feel, and the music added to the tension and drama of the show. Another thing that made the Daredevil show unique was its focus on the legal system and the idea of justice. The show portrayed the law as an imperfect system, which a lot of people like to believe the opposite. Through this, it was able to express the idea that justice was not always served. Matt Murdock, being a lawyer by day and vigilante by night, struggled with the idea of taking law into his own hands. The show explored the gray area between right and wrong and the consequences of his actions. The last thing that made Daredevil stand out in comparison to other Marvel shows was its representation of disability. As you know, Matt Murdock's blindness was not just a plot device, but an integral part of his character. So, now that we've talked about what made Daredevil so good, we can talk about what She-Hulk did to ruin his character. Basically, to sum it up, She-Hulk takes everything that Daredevil did good and shits on it. Marvel's exaggerated light tone allows for Daredevil to just seem very cringe and poorly written, to say the least. His dialogue in She-Hulk is very underwhelming. So I thought, you know what, just to save the hassle of me having to explain this even more, just look at this clip.
I'm gonna whoop your ass.
My ass remains unwhooped.
Like I established earlier, one of the things that made the Daredevil show so good was his dark tone, and when you put him in a setting with more lighter tone characters, it kind of just doesn't fit at all. This even is apparent in the comics when we see him team up with people like Spider-Man, and it affects his storylines for the worse, not for the better. Also, you could just tell that this light tone is affecting the way we perceive Daredevil, because even in his fights in She-Hulk, the fight choreography is just way worse than it was in the Daredevil show, way slower, and there's not as much gruesome things that make us actually believe that Daredevil is a vigilante. We would just think he's like any other superhero the way he's fighting in this show. And for the people that come in my comment section and like to say things like, well, Batman is a character who has a very dark tone, but sometimes he has a very light tone as well, The point is that Daredevil cannot have a light tone at all. It's more or less that when this is executed, it's exaggerated and ruins all his character development. And not only that, the characteristics that make him likable. Obviously, to any like 10 to 13-year-old who's watching She-Hulk for the first time, they're gonna sit there and say Daredevil's cool, but for the core fans who liked the first 3 seasons of the show and really enjoyed his team up with the other Netflix characters, they're looking at this and just saying, wow, just in awe. I don't know whose idea it was to put Daredevil beside She-Hulk in the first place, but they weren't thinking well. She-Hulk as a character is not even good. So adding Daredevil to the show, it's obvious that Kevin Feige was just trying to get some sort of fan service there to keep people engaged. Because once you watch the first 3 episodes of She-Hulk, you see the obvious flaws and lose a lot of engagement. Her dialogue is not even average, to say the least. Her character barely develops in the story, and the one redeeming quality about the show, which made it entertaining, which is Hulk, is taken out by the first to second episode. So yeah, to say the least, man, She-Hulk ruined Daredevil. And now, this brings me to my final point, which is how the MCU can fix this.
Just there for the paycheck.
Henchman goons, whatever.
There are 25 goons in the building. 7 below us.
Firstly, the MCU can just start by acknowledging the Netflix series and incorporating its continuity into the larger MCU. Not making any sort of reboot or new Daredevil series, but rather taking what we already have and just expanding upon that. This can be done through a wide variety of means, such as a brief cameo, reference or nod to the events of the series, and other things, but this would allow the fans to see that Daredevil's character and storyline not be completely forgotten. Secondly, the MCU should just give Daredevil a new direction and purpose with the larger MCU, like, for example, teaming up with other street-level heroes like Spider-Man, Luke Cage, or Jessica Jones to take on someone like a Fisk. But not arguing in a courtroom with She-Hulk. This is not how you bring back one of your most beloved characters. That's how you ruin them. And alternatively, he could be integrated into the Avengers storyline. We could even see him fight in Secret Wars or even Kang Dynasty. They should ensure that Daredevil's character is portrayed accurately and respectfully. This basically means staying true to his core values and beliefs, such as his commitment to justice and his Catholic faith. It also means that taking Charlie Cox, who can already embody the complexity and nuances of the character, and who can deliver the physically required role, would mean a lot for the character as a whole. They need to make sure that whatever happens in Daredevil Born Again, that it leads into the Spider-Man story. Spider-Man and Daredevil teaming up just seems imminent at this point and has been teased for a little while. Not only that, with Fisk showing up in Hawkeye, it makes it way more likely than it was before. So now that they have a common enemy, why wouldn't they team up, you know? And plus, I'm not even the only person that's complaining about this. A lot of other people are too. Literally the same criticisms I'm giving. They don't even think Daredevil should have been in She-Hulk in the first place, which I very strongly agree with. But, you know, in conclusion, I'm just a fan. I don't have any authority over anything Marvel does or anything Marvel will do, so don't think I do in that regard. But you know, hopefully Marvel can get their stuff together with Daredevil. And if you like this video a lot and are interested in seeing other Marvel videos that I've made, you should check out my video on Ultimate Spider-Man's aesthetic and the video before that, which is basically acting as a prequel, which goes over everything about Ultimate Spider-Man before Miles Morales and what I love so much about it. And you know, with this all being said, I mean, what else can I say? Hope you guys enjoyed the video. On and out.
Generous. A human being who did a lot of stupid shit, maybe even evil, but had one small piece of goodness in him. Maybe just a scrap, Frank, but something. And then you come along and that one tiny flicker of light gets snuffed out forever.